morning and welcome back to the G-BNLY YouTube channel, and you find me today in Philadelphia in the United States, where I'm going to be flying this beautiful British Airways 747-400 back across the Atlantic to Heathrow in London. This is a particularly special BA 747-400 because it's wearing one of the heritage liveries that were put on to a number of British Airways aircraft when it celebrated 100 years of flying in 2019. The 747-400s were treated in particular to some very special liveries, and Golf Bravo November Lima Yankee is seen here wearing the Landor livery, which was perhaps the most popular British Airways livery of all. It was worn by their aircraft during the late 1980s and during much of the 1990s. Of course, this aircraft, along with all other 747-400s, was withdrawn from service a little early due to COVID-19, but we can bring it back to life here on Flight Sim. So let's take a look at our route today. We're going to be flying the Philadelphia 2 departure. We are going to get some vectors from ATC, who are online despite the early hour. We're going to be taking off from 27 left, expecting to turn to 245 degrees, climbing to 5,000 feet, and then we will expect vectors to our first waypoint, which is called Ditch. Interesting name. And then we fly up the East Coast, so we're going to go over New York, over Boston. If the weather is clear, hopefully we might get a few views of one or other of those cities. We then hug the East Coast, then cross the Atlantic, and we'll come into the UK over Land's End and Cornwall, and fly along the southwest coast, up over Bournemouth, over the Isle of Wight, and then turn in towards London. We'll be approaching via Opmet 1 Hotel. We will take a look at that approach plate a little bit later on in the flight. And we'll be heading into to Ockham, which is the southwest holding point for London Heathrow. So that's what the flight looks like. Our expected flight time is about 6 to 6.5 hours, depending on winds. The winds are quite strong, so we might have a decent tailwind, which could get us back there a little bit quicker than expected. Let's jump in the cockpit and carry on with our preparations. So here in the cockpit, we are pretty much about ready to go. Actually, we've got everything set up. We've got the route put into the FMC. We've turned on all of our various systems. We're on APU power. We've disconnected the ground just a few minutes ago, and we've got the PFD already. We've got the flight directors on. One thing I've noticed I've not yet done here is put in our V2 speed into the MCP. So that's now done. So we'll also note here that I've put in the various bits and pieces from that departure plate into the MCP. So we're going to be turning to a heading of 245 degrees shortly after takeoff, and we're climbing up to 5,000 feet. And that, I expect, will also mirror the clearance that we receive as well. Otherwise, everything's all about set. We need to put in our squawk shortly, and we've set the auto brakes to RTO already. Seatbelt signs are on. I think we are all set to go and request our clearance, so let's do that now. Philadelphia Tower, Speedbird 066, type 747-400 at stand Alpha 25 with information Alpha, altimeter 3002, requesting clearance to Heathrow.
Speedbird 66 cleared as filed to the Heathrow Airport. Philadelphia 2 departure, radar vectors, ditch. Maintain 5,000, expect flight level 370, 10 minutes after departure. Departure frequency is 128.4, squawk 3057.
Speedbird 66 cleared as filed to Heathrow, flying the Philadelphia 2 departure, radar vectors to ditch, climb to 5,000 and expect flight level 370 10 minutes after departure. Departure frequency is 128.4, squawking 3057.
Speedbird 66 Philly Tower, read back correct, advise at the holding point 4.
Roger, understood. We'll call you from holding point 4, and we'll take a look at the map now. That's Speedbird 66. Yeah, that was. I was a bit surprised there. I thought for a minute there he was basically clearing us through to the taxiway. Sorry, through to the holding point for runway 27 left. But we'll take a look at the map shortly and see where holding point 4 is. So let's just pop in our transponder code. That was 3057. Everything else is exactly as we expected, having taken a look at the chart. So I'm going to take off, turn to 245 degrees, climb to 5,000 feet, and then we'll await radar vectors to ditch, which we can see on our navigation display here. So we're going to be taking off, flying in this direction here where the dotted line is, and then we're going to be turning left. Presumably we'll get some vectors to the left which will take us off towards ditch. So we were asked to call the tower back again from holding point 4, which is on Juliet, just in front of Tango Alpha. Let's take a quick look at the chart of the airport, and we can see Juliet running along just here, and there is Tango Alpha. Now I can't see holding point 4 marked on there explicitly, but I think we need to just make our way over there and we'll call from there. The other thing, of course, is I have default graphics for Philadelphia, so we're just going to have to take a kind of best guess at where about HP4 is, but we'll figure that out. Okay, so back in the cockpit, let's now get rid of the jetway. I'm going to turn on the beacon as well at this point. The important thing is that the tower controller has asked us to call him from holding point 4, so we don't need to request push and start clearance. Just realised I haven't closed the door, so let's just make sure we don't have a serious injury with someone walking out the door and smashing onto the concrete below. Closing all the doors and arming all the doors. Okay, that's good. Just double check there on our doors map, and you can now see that they're all closed and armed. Back to the engine display, and with the jetway out the way, we will now call out the pushback tug. On the 747-400, I need to turn off the packs manually in order to get the engines to start, so I'm just going to turn those off now. Just check around the aircraft, just for any other aircraft moving around. I don't think there are any. It's very early in the morning here in Philadelphia. I'm quite surprised there's even ATC on, to be honest. Okay, so we can release parking brakes. And we're pushing back. So let's get the engines on. Do 1 and 4 to start with. Now, just whilst we're pushing back, we're just going to have a look at the top-down map. So we've had a look at the taxiways. I think we're just going to call from here, which we will treat as being holding point 4 for today's purposes. So, as I say, these are default graphics, but just comparing what we have on the taxiway chart with what we're looking at here, I think the closest approximation to holding point 4 is just here. So we're going to follow that that approach in a few moments' time. Okay, so engines 1 and 4 are now started. The lights have gone off. We're going to start 2 and 3 now.
Speedbird 66, heavy Philly Tower. Runway 27 left at 01. Taxi via Kilo, November, Sierra. Hold short 27 right.
Taxi 27 left via Kilo, November, Sierra, and holding short 27 right, Speedbird 66. Well, he just made that a little bit easier for us. Because that means we can just taxi out as soon as we're ready to go, which is going to be in just a few moments' time, I think. So we'll set the parking brakes, we confirm good engine start, so we can get the pushback tug disconnected. And first of all, I'm just going to check my flight controls are all working as they should do. So ailerons to the left and to the right. Elevators down and up. Rudder right and left. And last but not least, we'll give the spoilers a quick check as well. They're all good as well. Good. And we're going to set the flaps to 10 degrees. That's our takeoff setting for today. And our trim needs to be at 5.8, which I've already set actually just down here. It's just below 6. A few other steps to do post takeoff. Post engine start. We can turn the hydraulics pressure demand switch to automatic on number 4. We can turn off the APU. We can turn the packs back on. And we're going to turn on the taxi lights. So we're looking to taxi out via Kilo, November and Sierra. Now, it looks like the taxiways here are actually correctly labelled. So what we're just going to do is, first of all, hang a right down Tango Alpha and head towards taxiway Kilo, which is the next one over on our right hand side. We then cross runway 27 right at Sierra, and will therefore need to hold short at Sierra before we cross over. Okay, so we're now on taxiway Kilo, and I can see that this next one, I think, is Romeo. That's Quebec. So we know that we're heading in the right direction for taxiway November. So here's November on the right hand side. It's quite a tight taxiway to turn into actually. Let's try and pull in here. There we are.
Speedbird 66 Philly Tower, cross 27 right, continue taxi, November, Sierra 127 left.
Clear to cross 27 right, continue taxi, November, Sierra, and Sierra 1 for 27 left, Speedbird 66. So here's Sierra, and the holding point just in front of us on the left there is Sierra 1. Speedbird 66, holding Sierra 1, ready for departure.
Speedbird 66, Philly Tower, flight heading 230 after departure, wind 310 runway 27 left, cleared for takeoff.
Clear takeoff 27 left, fly heading 230 degrees after takeoff, Speedbird 66. Okay, so slight change to the Philadelphia to departure then. We're not going to 245 degrees, we're going to 230 degrees after takeoff. Start the clock. And away we go.
Airspeed alive. Knots.
V1.
Rotate. V2. Positive rate of climb.
Gear up. Turning on the autopilot, let's select heading 230. I'm just going to put it in flight level change mode for the moment. Just keep it nice and
Speedbird
easy.
66 Heavy, Philly Tower. Contact approach 128.4. Good day.
128.4, thanks for the service, Speedbird 66. Philadelphia approach, Speedbird 66 with you climbing through 1,900 feet.
Speedbird 066 Heavy, Philadelphia departure radar contact climbing to 12000.
12000, Speedbird 66. We can up the speed a little bit now, so I'm going to take that up to 250.
Speedbird 66, turn left heading 110 when able to proceed direct ditch.
Left 110, direct to ditch when able, Speedbird 66. So we can bring the flaps in now. Do a few other bits and pieces, like turn off the taxi lights. Put the gear lever to the off position. There's the airport just over there, just taken off from. So expected flight time today is around about 6 to 6.5 hours. We should have some decent tailwinds to keep us going across the Atlantic. And we are climbing to an initial cruise altitude of flight level 370, although as we lose fuel weight we'll probably step climb to end up a little bit higher. So now at 110, and I'm now going to fly direct to ditch. Switch over to LNAV. And also switch over to VNAV to make sure that I've got a speed restriction in here of 250 below 10,000. Now put the flaps up as well. And that's it, we're on our way, we're on our route, and we're now going to fly across the Atlantic, and I'll pick up with you again when we're on our approach on the Altmac 1 Hotel arrival into Heathrow. Okay, so welcome back to the flight. We are now at flight level 390. We did a step climb during the cruise up from flight level 370. And we're just 15 miles now from the top of our descent. We are going to be approaching London Heathrow this afternoon via the Opmet 1 hotel arrival, which takes us right along the south coast. In fact, if we just look out the window down there, you can see the coast below us. Let's take a quick look at the approach chart. So, Opmet 1 hotel starts at Opmet. We need to be down at flight level 270 by Opmet, flight level 210 by Needle, which you'll note is on the Isle of Wight, where the Needles are. There's well, it's a tourist attraction. It's a geographical feature on the Isle of Wight called the Needles, and it looks like there's also a waypoint for aviation purposes at that precise spot as well. So we need to be flight level 210 at Needle, and then flight level 130 at Hazel. We'll expect flight level 7,000 feet around the time we get to Ockham. Ockham, of course, the southwest holding point for London Heathrow. So back in the cockpit, I'm just going to put in flight level 270 into the MCP here. And we will begin our descent in just a couple of miles. So I will put on the seatbelt signs. And here we go. We are now descending. So we've had an exceptionally good trip across the Atlantic. Let's just check on the journey time here. We've been going for 5 hours 25 minutes. As you can see, even now we've still got a very strong tailwind just behind us. Just on the navigation display here, we're benefiting from 70 knots of tailwind, and that has pushed us along at a fair rate of knots. So yeah, we make our way along the south coast to the Isle of Wight. At Needle, we're going to turn left and head towards Ockham, which is just southwest of Heathrow. Now, I'm watching the weather closely. At the moment, there's no one on VATSIM providing ATC for Heathrow, and there's no ATIS available either. For most of today, London Heathrow has been landing on runway 27 right, and at the moment they still are. But the wind is a little bit. It's close to being a switch over to runway 09 left and 09 right, I think. At the moment it's blowing at 160 degrees at 14 knots. That means it's fractionally blowing more towards the 09s than 27s, but at the moment they are still flying into 27 right. It also means that that's a crosswind, and a fairly strong crosswind as well. It's well, not strong. It's a modest crosswind, 14 knots, and it's also raining, so it's not going to be a particularly nice approach into Heathrow this evening, I'm afraid. That weather is absolutely authentic to the real world. This is one of the worst Mays in the UK that I can remember. It is cold and wet and windy out there. It feels more like it's January or February, to be perfectly honest. Temperature at Heathrow is just 10 degrees, and this is meant to be the beginnings of summer. Okay, so we're now already heading into our descent nicely here. Let's just start looking at our initial approach procedures. So the ATIS, we don't have any ATIS available. What I'm just going to do, I've tuned in on my COM2 Heathrow's ATIS frequency, 128.075. I'm just going to turn that radio on in case it becomes active, and that will put us on notice that we can get some air traffic control going. However, on the ATIS we have just been talking about the weather at Heathrow, and we know not to expect anything too tropical down there. It's just going to be pretty cold and miserable. Okay, so approach briefing. We've taken a look at the OPMET 1 Hotel approach plate. We're approaching flight level 270 now. We need to be at flight level 210 by Needle, so I'm just going to now select flight level 210. You can see that we are approaching on schedule. Let's also just take a look at the approach plate for runway 27 right. We're going to assume that it remains deactive for the time being, but I will keep an eye on traffic and switch over to the 09s if needs be. So, taking a look at the instrument approach plate, you can see here that our minimum descent altitude is going to be 247 feet. I'm just going to double check what the aircraft category is for a Boeing 747. It's just a while since I've flown it. I can't remember off the top of my head if it is approach category C or D. It is actually approach category D. Just as a tip there, I always use a website called skybury.aero, so Skybury, a bit like livery.aero, and they've got some really useful info pages on each aircraft, including what the approach category is. So looking at the Skybury page on the Boeing 747-400, I can see here that the APC is D. So approach category D, going back then to our instrument approach chart for runway 27 right at Heathrow. I can then find approach category D just down here, which actually increases our minimum descent altitude a little bit to 262 feet. So what I'm just going to do here to start with is pop in 262 feet into our minimum selector. Now the nearest 10 to that is 260, so I'll select that. And we're slightly off schedule on our descent now because I was just checking the approach plates. So I'm just going to start slowing us down a bit, and I'll put out the auto brakes for that purpose. Got plenty of time to make up the difference. We're about 2,300 feet above where we ought to be on our descent profile. So I'm just going to stick us into vertical speed mode to make sure that we keep that descent going down at a decent rate. Let's just flip back then to the instrument approach chart for 27 right. We've confirmed what our minimum descent altitude will be. That's 262. And we have put that into the primary flight display. And what we can also see here is our missed approach procedures. So we're going to climb to 3,000 in the event of a missed approach and go straight ahead until the later of either 1,580 feet or until we are 0 miles from the 27 right localizer. And we are then going to turn right to 316 degrees and we'll continue as directed. That's if there's any ATC on. So basically straight ahead up to 3,000 and then right to 316 degrees. We will be sure to reflect that in our MCP settings once we are a little bit closer in to the airport. Okay, so we're now over Needle, now just 1,500 feet or so above where we'd expect to be at this point, so we're making up that difference in our descent. Okay, so if you look to the approach plates, both for OPMET 1 Hotel and for ILS 27 right, a decision height and minimum descent altitude bugs are set. And next we're going to input our landing data. So I'm going to go to the INET ref page of the FMC. We're going to do a flaps 30 landing today. That means a VREF of 137 knots.
Bournemouth Tower, Bournemouth traffic. This is Gulf Sierra 1. We'll be joining right downwind for runway 264, touch and go. Gulf Sierra 1, Bournemouth traffic.
Okay, so now we're descending down to flight level 130. We want to ideally be at flight level 130 by about the point we get to Hazel. Just going to keep the speed brakes out. Obviously the Boeing 747-400 is a heavy plane, so it can pick up a bit of speed if you're descending quite steeply, which we are at the moment. So just again going back to the initial approach procedures, we've turned the seatbelts on. And I'm just going to recall the ICAS, and that's all fine. Auto brakes we are going to set to 1. It looks to be fairly quiet at the moment, so I don't think we need to be too concerned about vacating really quickly. If anything, I might try and roll to vacate on 27 right and get a little bit closer into Terminal 5 in so doing. I couldn't hear a word of that. Oh well. Wing lights we have, I think, switched on. No, we haven't. Let's turn those on then. Wing lights are on. And altimeters, we're expecting that the altimeters will be looking at the Heathrow METAR 1003. And I'm going to assume a transition altitude of 7,500 feet. So we will flick over to local pressure in around about 10,000 feet. 10,000 feet. Now, one other thing which is worth remarking upon at this stage is the bright colours we are seeing on the weather radar here. So on the right hand navigation display I have the terrain radar on, and over on the left hand side here I've got weather radar, and there is a big patch of red which is just to the south of Heathrow, so we need to keep an eye on that and see what's going on with that. Hopefully it won't cause us too much trouble. We might just need to avoid it if it gets close to Ockham. Okay, so
stand on traffic, Piper Golf Romeo Bravo 2 mile final, runway 23 stand up.
Okay, so we're pretty well set up, I think, for our approach and landing.
Traffic received Golf Taxi altitude is holding.
Just watching the speed a little bit because we're still descending fairly steeply at this point, but we're nearly there. We're coming up to Hazel now, just 1,500 feet again above where we expect it to be. I'm going to select flight level 70 into the MCP, and I'm going to just set the vertical speed selector at a rate which will mean that we will be level at flight level 70 by Ockham. Now, what I do for that, so the green line just here on the navigation display is showing me when I will reach 7,000 feet. I'm just making sure that that is roughly around about when we get to Ockham. I select 1,600, so my vertical speed selector here is minus 1,600. That green line goes a little bit further away. I'll try 1,500, and that looks good. Still got the speed brakes down at the moment though. Again, we are still descending at a fair rate of knots, but I have just pulled that in a little bit now. Once we get to Ockham, if we had air traffic control, I'd be expecting them to tell me to turn right to heading 080 degrees. So I'm going to select that in the MCP. so it's consistent. There are procedures you can fly when you don't have radar control, but there's a few aircraft. I've got VATScope open on my iPhone. VATScope is Flight Radar 24 for VATScope. And there are a fair few other aircraft flying into Heathrow at the moment. So I think rather than... I just want to keep my options open. If I put in the Ockham transition from Ockham into 27 right, which is the official procedure for what you'd fly in the event you don't have radar control, that might mean I get a bit too close to other traffic. Particularly looking at the navigation display here, I can see one other aircraft, this diamond here on the navigation display. I believe he may also be going into Heathrow. Or if he isn't, there's certainly another aircraft a little bit further in front of me on its way in. But I think, looking at my VATScope, that white diamond there is British Airways 2573, who's coming in from Palma de Mallorca. Very nice. So, going through 10,000 feet now, so we're going to turn on the landing lights. I'll turn on the taxi lights now as well. Now just 20 miles south-west of Heathrow. Just 11 miles from Ockham. Right. Just again looking at the navigation display here. It is possible to read TCAS alongside VATScope, I find, when there's no air traffic control on. So we now have two diamonds. So actually, the diamond which says -01 is an EasyJet on its way into Gatwick at 9,000 feet. So that makes sense, around about the same altitude as me. The other diamond, which says -23, that is the Speedbird
84 Delta Mike from
coming in
November
from
Bravo
Palma de Mallorca.
27 left takeoff.
So I think, looking at the navigation display here and the lack of other diamonds in the area, I think the airspace is fairly clear. We'll keep an eye on things, but I think it will just be the Palma flight and then ourselves. So we're approaching Ockham now. I'm going to slow up to 220 degrees. The speed brakes out again, just to...
Traffic Speedbird 2573 at 5,000 feet, running base ILS 27 right 73,000 with port final Speedbird 2573.
Another Speedbird radio call there. That was Speedbird 2573. That is the aircraft which is coming in from Palma. So I'm going to continue the descent down now to about 6,000 feet, and we're going to do that on flight level change at 220 knots, just to make sure we maintain separation. And I'm now going to select 080 degrees on the heading.
Under city traffic, North Bravo, my Sierra with the 862, intercepting the ILS for 09.
Which is going to take us down to 5,000 feet. Heathrow traffic, Speedbird 66, overhead Ockham, flying 080 degrees, downwind leg for ILS 27 right, Heathrow traffic. So that's my intentions there on VATSIM. So I'm actually using my TCAS quite a lot here. I can now see, again on the navigation display, the white diamond, 2,000 feet below me. That's what the -20 means. He's descending, and you can see he's lining up with 27 right. And I'm going to follow that kind of pattern. So I'm going to fly another sort of 10 miles or so on this heading, and then fly my base leg. That will be a good way to maintain separation. Ooh, I haven't switched over to standard pressure. Okay, 1003.
Heathrow traffic, speedbird 2573, established ILS 27 right, 11 miles to go, speedbird 2573.
So he is now established, and again, I can verify that looking at the TCAS. Obviously, it takes a while to get used to understanding VATSIM controllers and speaking air traffic control language when you go onto VATSIM. But I have to say, once you've got used to it, I find it harder flying in these kind of conditions without air traffic control. It's more challenging, and maintaining separation becomes a big part of what I'm trying to do by reference to VATScope on an iPhone, my TCAS display on the navigation display. It's much trickier. Now again, another diamond here, the -27 diamond. The VATScope is showing that he is flying into London City, so I will assume I don't need to worry about him. Now I'm going to descend down to 3,000 feet. Look out. First bit of flaps. I'm going to turn left to...
London City traffic, Golf Bravo, Mike COD 62 on final for ILS 09, 3 miles to run.
I'm going to turn left to 360 degrees, or 000 on the... I thought for a minute there I saw some traffic, but I think they're okay. Yeah, so the MCP now has 000 degrees, that means we're flying directly north. Heathrow traffic, speedbird 66, turning base leg for ILS 27 right, Heathrow traffic. Flaps to 5 degrees. I'm going to also set arm the speed brake at this
Heathrow
point.
traffic, speedbird 900 Alpha, 3,000 feet, turning base leg right hand 427 left arrival.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm going to slow right down then, because there's some traffic here. this diamond, plus 02, he is turning right base for 27 left, which is interesting. So we could have a loss of separation here. Speedbird 6, Heathrow traffic, Speedbird 66 will establish for 27 right from the north and follow Speedbird 900 Alpha, Heathrow traffic. Just made a snap decision there because we're at the same altitude. Traffic. We have a TCAS warning, and we're at the same altitude, that's why it says 00. So what I'm actually going to do is go through the localizer, which I've just done, and establish from the north. So I'm just going to turn around, and in fact I'm going to go this way. Put flaps to 10 as I'm going quite slowly here. This is a very unusual manoeuvre, but clearly I don't want to lose separation and have a collision with another aircraft. I'm not quite sure where that other aircraft came from. In fact, I think he's just done a circuit at Heathrow, looking at... Yeah, he's... Yeah, so that aircraft, Speedbird 900 Alpha, I think has just done a circuit, which is why it sort of came out of nowhere. Heathrow traffic, Speedbird 66, establishing ILS 27 right, and we are 15 miles out, Heathrow traffic.
Heathrow traffic, Speedbird 900 Alpha, fully established, ILS 27 left, 7 miles.
Heathrow traffic, Speedbird 25.
Okay, so slightly unconventional, but I think we're kind of back on track again now. What I'm just going to wait for now is for the localizer to come across. I'm going to stick on approach hold. So we will capture the localizer as we fly through it. It will be any second now, I think. You can see Battersea Power Station down there, you can see Hyde Park with the Serpentine down there. So the big patch of green, and there's a lake in the middle of it, that's Hyde Park. So actually that's a good example of how air traffic control actually makes it easier. Once you've got to grips with doing VATSIM and speaking the lingo, it's an awful lot easier to fly through busy airspace with ATC online than it is to use Unicom. So the localizer is now just starting to creep across. If I just put on this display, you'll see it. You can see that it's become live. We are on a very, very gradual intercept heading, and it's even more the case given the fact we've got strong crosswinds. So when we were on our approach, I said the crosswinds on the ground are blowing at about 160 degrees at 14 knots. They're somewhat stronger where we are right now, so it's currently 197 degrees at 38 knots, and that is having an impact on our ability to capture the glide slope at the moment. Sorry, the localizer at this point in time. So here we go. We're just capturing it now. And we're now 8 miles out. Now we obviously can't see the runway, that's not an issue. We'll just keep it on full approach hold for the time being. And we're going to maintain 160 knots to 4 DME. Heathrow traffic, Speedbird 66 now fully established. ILS 27 right, 7 miles. Heathrow traffic. So once again, we just want to remind ourselves of that go-around procedure. Straight ahead to 3,000 feet, and turning right to 316 degrees after either 1,580 feet or 0 miles to the DME, 0 miles to the localizer for 27 right, whichever comes later. So 316 set in heading, 3,000 set in altitude on the MCP, and now we can focus on our approach. So we're now visual with the runway. A couple of miles to go, and then I'm going to slow it down to our VREF of 137 knots. I'm going to lower the landing gear. And you can really see that crab angle on the navigation display and when we just glimpse the runway you can see it as well. Hopefully the winds will drop a little bit. They should do. It's only meant to be around about 14 knots.
Heathrow traffic, Speedbird 900 Alpha, vacated 27 left onto Alpha.
But right now it's about 20 knots of crosswind, so that's pretty strong. Okay, we're going to now slow down to VREF.
Base traffic easy 9921, there's 5.25 to land.
And I'm going to take off the autopilot, take off the auto throttle. Heathrow traffic, Speedbird 66, short final, ILS 279. Heathrow traffic. So very much following the flight directives right now, because I can't quite see the runway as clearly as I'd like. And incrementally getting the flaps out. They're now going to 30 degrees, just fractionally above VREF. As I say, this is early summer in the UK. Welcome. What a glorious evening this is. 12 degrees, cloudy, wet, and very windy. So yeah, those winds have just dropped off a bit now. It's 170 degrees at 17 knots. Pretty stable, obviously, in a 747, but still a little bit of extra work here. Certainly causing a bit of movement on short final.
Approaching minimums.
Just keeping the speed a little bit over VREF, given the weather's a little bit unfavourable.
Minimums.
We're going to go ahead and land.
Forty, 30, 20, 10.
There we go. Sure what happened to my reverse thrust there. That's not the first time I've had that issue. It just doesn't seem to want to engage on the 7.4. But we're down safely, that's the main thing. Okay, I'm going to bring in the speed brakes. Bring in the flaps. And we are going to roll to vacate all the way up at Terminal 5, which is just what we wanted. Flight directives, we can turn off the auto brakes. I'll announce that I've vacated. Heathrow traffic, Speedbird 66, vacated runway 27 right. Heathrow traffic. Landing lights can go off, strobes off, wing lights off as well. We'll select a gate of our choice, which is going to be something beginning with 53. How about 538? Sounds good. So that was challenging on approach there, possibly more challenging than I expected because of the lack of ATC and trying to maintain separation just through Unicom communications with fellow virtual pilots out there. In addition, of course, the weather is foul. Here in the UK, it feels like spring is something that's happened for everyone else, but it hasn't really happened here yet. Strong crosswinds on final approach, and poor visibility as well, so lots of challenges there. So here is our gate. As always, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you have, please do click the subscribe button. Please click the like button and click on the bell if you want to hear about future videos where I do short and long haul flying on both Prepare 3D V5 and on MSFS 2020. If you have any tips on how I could fly better, then please leave a comment.
Steven Travis Grid, take flex, established ILS 278.
And I will see you again very, very soon for more long and short haul flying. Thanks again for watching, and I'll speak to you again very soon.